Do you like gambling? What's that? You don't? Well, why not try out Pachinko instead? I mean, it's not technically gambling if you're only winning balls that you can exchange for cash. I mean, hey, loopholes are called loopholes for a reason. Yep, Pachinko has quite the grasp on Japan. It's kinda like pinball, except you got a lot of little balls instead of one large one. I've been saying balls a lot, haven't I?
There's a wonderful word.
It has its origins in the 1920s children's game Corinth, and when Japan saw it, they likely thought, I need it! So they brought it back home. The name Pachinko comes from the pachin sound that the balls make. But it wasn't until after World War II that it went from something you'd see in the occasional candy shop to the multi-trillion yen industry that it is today. And we're on the lower end of when it was popular, by the way. So if you go to Japan and all of a sudden you hear, it's probably a pachinko parlor. Trying to play it is an uphill battle. It can be unpredictable, uncontrollable, and depending on where you are, a bit rigged. Kinda like the journey of Sunja and her family in Pachinko. That's right, today we're talking about Pachinko, and not Pachinko.
I love Pachinko!
Roll intro. Let's take another trip down memory lane. Remember when I recommended checking out the novel Pachinko by Min Jin Lee? Yeah, I hope the 100 of you who watched that video did that, so I can have somebody to talk to. To this day, it's one of my favorite books, and it truly doesn't feel as long as it is. I mean, look at this chonker. So when I heard that a television series based on the book was in the works, I was really excited. Except it was being produced by Apple? Hey, does anyone actually have Apple TV Plus? You know, the streaming service Apple made because why the fuck not? Everyone else is doing it. And also,
Money.
Me, I never tried it out before because A, money, and B, there's really not much on there that interests me. The only reason I even gave it a shot is because I splurged earlier this year on an Apple TV box. And to try and encourage me to give them more money, I got 6 months of Apple TV Plus.
For free?
Half a year free so I can watch Pachinko and maybe one or two other things? Not a bad investment, all things considered. I've had worse. And goddammit, I think I'm gonna have to renew the subscription when season 2 comes out. Oh boy, how do I sum Pachinko up quickly? To start, it's a generational saga like Roots or the Joy Luck Club. However, the TV series adaptation of Pachinko is told through a dual timeline. In the first, we focus on Sunja as she comes of age during the Japanese occupation of Korea. Many of the people are barely scraping by, and even the slightest hint of rebellion or anger towards the Japanese is suppressed. Sunja and her mother are another family in the struggle. They run a boarding house to make ends meet, something that's gotten especially difficult after Sunja's father passed away. But when she gets entangled in a love affair with the wealthy fish broker Hansu from Boys Over Flowers, things get difficult, because she gets pregnant. And he's already married.
난 결혼 못해. 가정이 있어.
Oops.
The only way for Sunja to avoid disgracing herself is to leave everything she knows behind and move to Japan with her freshly acquired saint of a husband who knows all about her condition, and is willing to help. Once in Osaka, she attempts to integrate with the Korean community. Sounds good, doesn't work. In the other timeline, it's 1989, and the focus is on Sunja's grandson Solomon. Instead of living in Japan like his family, he's working his way up in a banking firm in New York City. Unfortunately for him, he's being passed over for a big promotion due to his inexperience.
It's better for you if you have one more year under your belt.
Sounds familiar, eh? As luck would have it, he gets one last shot at getting that VP position. To go to Japan and convince an elderly Korean woman to sell her house, thus closing a major business deal. The catch being, she refuses to give in to the Japanese as a last act of defiance. Oh, and where does Pachinko fit into all of this? Well, around 80% of Pachinko parlors in Japan are owned by ethnic Koreans, and Solomon's father is one of these owners. The success of his Pachinko parlor has helped the family prosper, but given them a sketchy appearance due to negative connotations with the business. Kinda like how in America casinos are linked to the mafia. This aspect of their lives doesn't really get a lot of screen time here, so read the book to find out more. What up, subtitles? You know that Pachinko is going to be good before you even see a single frame. You wanna know why? Because of this. See this? See those little silly little letters? That's right, an American studio decided, you know what we should do to tell this story about Koreans in Japan? Actually tell it in Korean and Japanese. Fucking revolutionary, right? I mean, it is, but think about it. A lot of the American-made media we get about Asia usually comes with a caveat.
We cannot forget
They're in English. Not all of them, but if you want to have a big budget for your project, you gotta speak the Korean to the studio. Good films do this, and bad films do this. While it's not necessarily the kiss of death, it usually feels
Wrong.
like, do you seriously think Ken Watanabe is going to speak English to a geisha? So when you come across American-produced media that doesn't do that, it's a little special. They even color code the subtitles to let us know when the characters switch between Korean and Japanese.
せやけどこんなに食べられへんやろ作りすぎや
니도 뭐야 쟤? 니 꼴 봐라. 삐쩍 말라가 가죽만 남아갖고.
미세 뭐 팔라고 말했어요 도어상가 이렇게 잘 되는데 미세 더 가만히 버거시 하셔야지
Swoon. When dealing with a subject matter like this, and on a scale this large, it would be easy for the show to put the characters on hold for pure spectacle. But Pachinko manages to feel like a proper epic without needing the scale of something like Lawrence of Arabia or many other K-dramas. Rather than getting directors who are known for blockbusters or historical epics, Pachinko went for the exact opposite approach. Half of the episodes are from Kogonada and the others are by Justin Chon. Kogonada, just as his pseudonym implies, focuses on simple but complex character studies, along with a lot of video essays. Hey honey, look what you could become! Wink wink. Chon's output focuses on the Asian American experience and the hurdles many have to face. However, they're usually focused on only a handful of characters that are up against a bigger issue.
Hey look, it's another Twilight actor doing something that's actually worth their talent.
While their different directing styles might clash with one another, their goal is still the same. Keep the characters in focus. And they do that job really well. There are plenty of big scenes that help to plant us in this time, of course, but there's not too much of them to get in the way. There are quiet moments that might not progress the story, but they do dive into the immigrant experience. The making and eating of rice is even given the proper time and explanation for why it's important to these characters. It's not just a food, it's a reminder of the home that they left behind. But thankfully, Pachinko was given the budget and crew to bring those eras to light. The 80s scenes look nice, but we're kinda used to stuff like that nowadays. It feels like so many people are nostalgic for that time, so now every other show or movie has to have an 80s aesthetic or setting.
Cause it's radical, man.
Shut the fuck up!
It's the sections set in the 1910s and 30s, though, that really stand out. We got all of these amazing sets that look and feel lived in. And the costume design? Excellent. Not only is it a good sign that they got a Korean woman to lead the department, that's a surprisingly hard thing to get right in Hollywood, but they clearly did a lot of research to get it right, and considering how important the Korean hanbok is and how it's changed over the years, that's an impressive feat. More importantly, although the hanbok look good, they don't look too good. You know, like someone just made them in a factory and put them on the actors. They're not extremely bright or colorful because conditions at the time didn't allow for expensive dyes or material. Oh, and there's men in suits. We can't not have them in a period piece, can we? Swoon times 2. Speaking of suits and swoons, the cast is of course terrific. You can sense the amount of time that the production took to make sure everyone was the best choice. Even down to getting actors with freckles. They're so cute. How long did it all take? Between 6 and 7 months apparently. Yet again, it paid off. Their acting, chemistry, looks all A+. Even minor characters in the overall story make a strong impression. Perhaps to Western audiences these aren't the biggest names, but everyone fits their character perfectly. I especially want to point out Sunja's actress, Kim Min-ah, in this moment as she confronts her brother-in-law.
그날까지도 거들게 해줘 있어. 아무것도 안 하고 있으면 이 답답한 심정을 어떻게 못 하겠습니다.
Her facial expressions are so powerful, you can feel her desperation. Give this woman an Oscar, please. You know what also looks great? The fucking opening credits.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It is not really what I was expecting out of Pachinko either. Maybe something big and dramatic or serious and moody, again like what you would normally see in a story like this. Instead it's tonally the exact opposite. It's energetic, it's upbeat, it's highly saturated, it's using an American pop song of all things, and it's great! There are so many nice details like the historical footage of occupied Korea and actual photographs of the cast. It just makes me smile watching all of these characters dancing and having the time of their life in this Pachinko parlor, especially when a lot of them rarely smile in the actual series. I also love that they apparently shot Lee Min-ho's stuff to sexy back.
I'm bringing sexy back.
Trying to put that image in your mind.
They say he's the sexiest thing since sex.
Skipping this is not an option, guys, so watch it during every episode, okay? Good. I will say, though, that the Korean karaoke version in the last episode is... not it.
Look how they mess with my boy.
I'm all for foreign language renditions of English pop songs, but I like it much better the way they were done in, say, Crazy Rich Asians or Chungking Express. Let's get a little more serious now. If you couldn't tell, this series doesn't necessarily depict the Japanese in the most favorable light, which has been a point of contention from some. Is it too harsh? Should it have tried to make at least a few of the Japanese characters sympathetic? I mean, a subject like this is bound to be a big shit show for a lot of people who get involved, and I don't think I'm in the best boat to weigh in. Nevertheless, you're here to listen to my thoughts and opinions on stuff like this, so here you go. I think it's great. There are times when smoothing over a tyrannical regime is an insult to the people who had to live through it, and this is one of them. Admitting the mistakes of the past is the first step in the right direction, and quite frankly, Japan still has a reputation for Japanese exceptionalism, to put it nicely. To anyone who would like to hear a nuanced, well-researched, and emotion-inducing description of what it's like to be Japanese, I highly recommend you watch Greg Lamb's documentary, Being Japanese. There is an account from a Zainichi Korean man in there, along with multiple other people who struggle more or less with a Japanesey identity. It's a very powerful video, and I can't recommend it enough. Even though there has been an immense amount of praise for Pachinko, there is one thing that most agree isn't so good about the show. Yep, here come those dreaded changes! Oh shit! What up? The series creator has stated she wants to have the show run for about 4 seasons, and that should clue you in on the amount of deviations from the source material. And they're not always for the best. Now, I should clarify that making changes when adapting a book isn't automatically a bad thing. The changes made for Pachinko, though, are a mixed bag. Some are pretty good and give us some impactful moments. The others help me understand why Min Jin Lee left the show and refuses to comment on it. I'm not going to be able to point out all of them, that would require another video entirely, so I'll just give you a quick rundown. We got characters meeting who never met in the book, characters going places where they never went in the book, characters dying who never died in the book, and characters who never existed in the book. Except this guy, this daddy, I approve of. Remember that one American guy who speaks cringy Japanese? Yeah, he's brand new. Sure, he offers up the Western ignorance of
All Koreans versus Japanese situation. Why can't people just get over that? It's the past. It's done.
But I still can't help but wonder if him and his dogshit accent were really a necessary addition. The same goes for an episode that's dedicated to giving a backstory to one of the characters. A filler episode, if you will. It's not bad per se, and it does explore the aftermath of the 1923 Kanto earthquake, which is cool, but again, I don't know if we needed this. It's like giving a backstory on how Poirot got his mustache. They did that, by the way, and it's just as bad as it sounds.
You'll grow a mustache.
So, wait, actually, yeah, nothing can be worse than that.
Look how they mess.
But arguably the biggest and most divisive change the series makes is in its presentation. The book is told in a straightforward chronological style. The show is not. Those portions set in the 80s with Solomon and an older Sunja, yeah, that's all in the final part of the book. In the show, it takes up half of each episode. Dramatically speaking, it makes some sense. If the TV series was to end exactly like the book, some might feel it was a little bit anticlimactic. But with Pachinko, a lot of what makes it fascinating is Sunja's journey. By breaking her story up like this, the series loses some of the impact that the book had, in my humble opinion. I don't find this switching confusing like some people do. After all, if you couldn't tell at the time by the clothing or the location, maybe you'd figure it out because of the titles. They ain't small little blobs at the bottom of the screen. They're literally right there in the middle of the damn screen. They're even in 3 languages. You're just not paying attention. Now, the 1980s sections aren't awful. Again, yuh-jung is great and Junha does a good job too, but Solomon...
나오미さんは女に生まれて運が悪かったですね。
特にこの国で。
He's kind of a dick. Sure, he's supposed to be this workaholic businessman willing to get ahead by any means, but it toes the line a little bit too much. He even acts this way towards his own grandmother. How dare you teach me empathy? Don't you know it ruined me? Calm down, bro. Devoting a fair amount of the runtime to him is a bit strange to me. And yet, I can't say that structuring the show like this was an entirely bad decision. The show frequently makes not only great thematic parallels with the two timelines, but great visual ones too. The family may be wealthier in the 1980s, but their struggles with identity and prejudice are just as relevant as they were in the 30s. Episode 4 has so many great transitions between the past and the present. As Sunja is preparing to return to Korea, her mother is preparing for her to leave. As Solomon dances in a moment of freedom, Sunja is filled with joy at being home after so long. While I wouldn't have chosen to tell Pachinko this way, if I absolutely had to, then I would have been a little bit more economical. Perhaps instead of constantly switching between the timelines, do the opposite. Set most of one episode in either the past or present while opening and closing in the other. It could still have those powerful transitions and connections, but it would help us get absorbed in the lives of these characters much better. Sometimes it's just better to keep things simple.
I think the best way to tell a story is by starting at the end briefly, then going back to the beginning, periodically returning to the end, maybe giving different characters perspectives throughout, just to give it a bit of dynamism. Otherwise it's just sort of a linear story.
Just tell us what happened.
American television seems to be a little bit more willing to take risks nowadays. Now, I'm going to be sticking to actual Korean films and TV, of course, but I'm cautiously optimistic that stories like this can get a good budget and actual effort behind them. K-dramas have been getting more exposure in pop culture, with Squid Game and Parasite having enormous success here. There's definitely a lot of mediocre stuff out there, so it's nice to see that we can still see great stories like Pachinko being put to the screen. It might not be a masterpiece like some say, but it's still one of the more gripping, touching, and inspiring stories out there. So whether you see it as an alright adaptation or its own separate entity, I think Pachinko is worth checking out. So, get yourself that free trial and binge it real quick. And see y'all next time!